15-year-old Maya Johnson adjusted her backpack nervously as she approached the boarding gate at Chicago O'Hare Airport. This was her first time flying alone, and her stomach churned with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She clutched her boarding pass tightly, reading it for the 100th time to make sure everything was correct. Flight 847 to New York, seat 12A, first class. Her mother, Victoria Johnson, had insisted on the first-class ticket despite Maya's protests that economy would be fine. "You deserve the best, sweetheart," her mother had said with that mysterious smile she always wore when discussing their family's finances. Maya never fully understood how her mother could afford such luxuries on what seemed like a modest income. But she had learned not to question it. As Maya joined the boarding line, she noticed the other first-class passengers. Well-dressed business people in expensive suits, elderly couples dripping with jewelry, and families who clearly belonged to a different world than the one Maya knew. She looked down at her simple jeans, sneakers, and favorite purple hoodie, suddenly feeling out of place. The flight attendant checking boarding passes was a tall, blonde woman in her 40s named Patricia Williams. Patricia had worked for Sci-Fi Airlines for 12 years and prided herself on maintaining what she called standards in the first-class cabin. She believed she could spot troublemakers and people who didn't belong just by looking at them. When Maya stepped forward with her boarding pass, Patricia's eyes immediately narrowed. She saw a young black girl in casual clothes holding what appeared to be a first-class ticket, and her assumptions kicked in immediately. Without even properly examining the boarding pass, Patricia's mind was made up. "Excuse me, young lady," Patricia said in a condescending tone that made Maya's cheeks burn. "I think you might be in the wrong line. Economy boarding is over there." She pointed dismissively toward the longer line of passengers waiting to board. Maya's heart raced as she felt the eyes of other passengers turning toward them. "Actually, I have a first-class ticket," she said quietly, holding up her boarding pass. "See? Seat 12A. Patricia barely glanced at the ticket before shaking her head. "That can't be right. There must be some mistake. Let me see that." She snatched the boarding pass from Maya's hands with unnecessary force, examining it with exaggerated skepticism. Other passengers in line began to murmur and shift uncomfortably. Some pulled out their phones, sensing that something was about to happen. Maya could feel her face getting hot with embarrassment as more people stared at her. "This ticket looks suspicious to me," Patricia announced loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "How exactly did you get this ticket, young lady? Did someone give it to you? Because I find it very hard to believe that someone like you would be flying first class." Maya's voice trembled as she tried to explain. "My mother bought it for me. She made the reservation online and everything. Please, can you just check your system?" But Patricia had already decided what she was going to do. In her mind, this was clearly a case of someone trying to sneak into first class with a fake or stolen ticket. She had dealt with situations like this before, or at least she thought she had. "I'm sorry, but I can't allow you to board with this ticket," Patricia said, her voice getting louder and more authoritative. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside while I call security." Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes. This was supposed to be an exciting adventure, her first solo flight to visit her grandmother in New York. Instead, it was turning into a nightmare. She could hear people whispering behind her, some expressing sympathy, others seeming to agree with the flight attendant's suspicious attitude. "Please, just check your computer," Maya pleaded. "The reservation should be there under Johnson." Maya Johnson. "My mother's name is Victoria Johnson." Patricia rolled her eyes dramatically. "Listen, sweetie, I've been doing this job for 12 years. I know a legitimate ticket when I see one, and I know when someone is trying to pull a fast one. This ticket," she held up Maya's boarding pass, "is clearly fraudulent." Without warning, Patricia tore the boarding pass in half, then tore it again, letting the pieces flutter to the ground. "Problem solved. Now please move along so legitimate passengers can board." The gasps from other passengers were audible. Several people started recording with their phones, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Maya stared at the torn pieces of her ticket on the floor, tears now streaming down her face. "You can't do that," Maya cried out. "That was my ticket. My mother paid for that." Patricia crossed her arms smugly. "If your mother really paid for a first-class ticket, she can contact customer service and sort it out. But I'm not allowing anyone with suspicious documentation onto this aircraft. Security will escort you out now." Maya knelt down and gathered the torn pieces of her boarding pass, her hands shaking. She had never felt so humiliated or helpless in her life. The other passengers watched in a mixture of shock and discomfort, but no one stepped forward to help. As airport security approached, summoned by Patricia's call, Maya clutched the torn ticket pieces and tried to explain her situation. But Patricia had already painted her as a troublemaker, trying to scam her way into first class. And the security guard seemed inclined to believe the airline employee over a teenager. What none of them knew was that at that very moment, Victoria Johnson was sitting in the executive boardroom of Sci-Fi Airline's headquarters, reviewing quarterly reports and preparing for the most important announcement of her career. The company she had built from the ground up over the past 15 years was about to expand internationally, and she was finally ready to step out of the shadows and take her rightful place as the public face of the airline. Maya was escorted away from the gate, still clutching the pieces of her destroyed ticket, unaware that her humiliation was about to become the catalyst for the biggest shakeup in Sci-Fi Airlines history. Maya sat in the airport security office, her eyes red from crying and the torn pieces of her boarding pass spread out on the table in front of her. The security supervisor, a kind-faced man named Officer Rodriguez, had listened to her story with growing concern. Unlike the flight attendant, he had actually taken the time to look up her reservation in the airline system. "Miss Johnson," Officer Rodriguez said gently, "I want you to know that your ticket was completely legitimate. The reservation is right here in the system, paid for in full, first-class seat 12A. That flight attendant had no right to destroy your boarding pass." Maya looked up hopefully. "Does that mean I can still catch my flight?" Officer Rodriguez glanced at his watch and shook his head sadly. "I'm afraid the flight has already departed. But don't worry, we're going to make this right. I'm calling the airline's customer service manager right now." Meanwhile, on Flight 847, Patricia Williams was feeling quite pleased with herself. She had successfully maintained the standards of first class by keeping out what she perceived as an undesirable passenger. As she served champagne to the legitimate first-class travelers, she bragged to her colleague Jennifer about the incident. "You should have seen her face when I tore up that fake ticket," Patricia whispered as they prepared the meal service. "These people think they can just waltz into first class like they own the place." "I showed her where she really belongs." Jennifer frowned uncomfortably. "Are you sure the ticket was fake, Patricia?" "Maybe you should have checked the system first." Patricia waved dismissively. "Trust me, I've been doing this long enough to spot a fraud from a mile away. That girl was trying to scam her way into first class, and I wasn't having it." Unknown to Patricia, several passengers had recorded the entire incident on their phones. One passenger, Marcus Chen, a social media influencer with over 2 million followers, was already editing the footage during the flight. He had watched in horror as the flight attendant destroyed a young girl's ticket without proper verification, and he knew this story needed to be told. Back at the airport, Maya tried calling her mother, but Victoria was in back-to-back meetings and couldn't answer. Maya left a tearful voicemail explaining what had happened, her voice breaking as she described the humiliation she had endured. Officer Rodriguez had managed to reach the airline's customer service department, but the representative he spoke to seemed more interested in protecting the flight attendant than helping Maya. "These situations are always difficult," the customer service manager said dismissively. "Flight attendants have the authority to deny boarding if they suspect fraudulent documentation." "But the ticket wasn't fraudulent," Officer Rodriguez insisted. "I'm looking at the legitimate reservation right here in your own system. Your employee destroyed a valid boarding pass and humiliated a minor passenger without cause." The customer service manager sighed. "We'll look into it and get back to you. In the meantime, we can book the passenger on tomorrow's flight." Officer Rodriguez could see that Maya was devastated by the prospect of waiting another day. Her grandmother was expecting her, and she had been looking forward to this trip for months. He decided to take matters into his own hands and contact his supervisor, who had connections higher up in the airline's management structure. While Maya waited in the security office, Victoria Johnson was finally finishing her meetings for the day. She had built Sci-Fi Airlines from a small regional carrier into one of the most respected airlines in the country, but she had always preferred to work behind the scenes. Very few employees knew that the Victoria Johnson listed as CEO in company documents was the same person who had started as a baggage handler 20 years ago and worked her way up through every department. Victoria's assistant knocked on her office door. Mrs. Johnson, you have several missed calls from Maya. She sounds upset. Victoria's heart immediately clenched with worry. Maya was her whole world. The reason she had worked so hard to build this empire. She had kept her success relatively private to give Maya a normal childhood. But she had always made sure her daughter had the best of everything. Victoria quickly dialed Maya's number, her concern growing when she heard her daughter's tearful voice recounting the events at the airport. As Maya described how the flight attendant had torn up her ticket and accused her of fraud, Victoria's expression grew darker and darker. "Sweetheart, I want you to stay right there with Officer Rodriguez," Victoria said, her voice carefully controlled but seething with anger beneath the surface. "Mommy is going to fix this right now." After hanging up with Maya, Victoria sat in her executive chair for a long moment, staring out the window at the Sci-Fi Airlines planes taking off and landing. She had built this company on principles of respect, dignity, and exceptional service for all passengers. What had happened to her daughter was not just a personal attack, it was a betrayal of everything she had worked to create. Victoria opened her laptop and pulled up the employee records. Patricia Williams, 12 years of service, generally positive reviews, but she noticed a pattern in the complaints file. There had been several incidents over the years involving Patricia's treatment of minority passengers, but they had been dismissed as misunderstandings or policy enforcement. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text message from her head of public relations. "Mrs. Johnson, we have a situation. There's a video going viral on social media about one of our flight attendants destroying a passenger's ticket. The passenger appears to be a young black girl. It's getting a lot of negative attention." Victoria clicked on the link her PR manager had sent and watched in horror as the video showed her daughter being humiliated and having her ticket destroyed. The comments section was exploding with outrage, and the story was being picked up by news outlets. But what made Victoria's blood boil wasn't just the public relations nightmare. It was seeing her baby girl standing there helplessly as a Sci-Fi Airlines employee treated her with such cruelty and disrespect. This wasn't about the company's reputation anymore. It was personal. Victoria stood up and walked to her office window, looking down at the bustling airport below. For 15 years, she had built this airline while raising Maya mostly as a single mother. She had worked 18-hour days, made countless sacrifices, and poured her heart and soul into creating something she could be proud of. She had always planned to eventually step into the public eye as the face of Sci-Fi Airlines, but she had wanted to do it on her own terms, when Maya was older and could handle the spotlight. Instead, her daughter had been thrust into the public eye in the most horrible way possible by one of Victoria's own employees. Victoria picked up her phone and made a call that would change everything. "This is Victoria Johnson. I need you to prepare the jet immediately and get me Patricia Williams's complete employment file. I want to know everything about her, every complaint, every incident, every single thing." As Victoria prepared to leave her office, she looked at the framed photo on her desk of her and Maya at Maya's 8th grade graduation. Maya was beaming with pride, wearing the diamond earrings Victoria had given her as a graduation gift. Victoria had promised Maya that day that she would always protect her and make sure she had every opportunity in the world. Today, that promise had been broken by one of Victoria's own employees. But Victoria Johnson hadn't become the CEO of a major airline by backing down from challenges. Patricia Williams and everyone else at Sci-Fi Airlines were about to learn that some mistakes come with consequences far bigger than they could ever imagine. Flight 847 landed at JFK Airport in New York, and Patricia Williams was in an unusually good mood. She had received several compliments from first-class passengers about the excellent service, and she felt proud of maintaining what she considered the proper standards for the premium cabin. As passengers disembarked, she said goodbye to each one with a bright smile, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing. Marcus Chen, the social media influencer who had recorded the incident, was among the last to leave the plane. As he walked past Patricia, he shook his head in disgust. The video he had posted during the flight had already been viewed over 500,000 times, and the comments were overwhelmingly critical of the flight attendant's behavior. "Excuse me," Marcus said to Patricia as he passed her. "I hope you know that what you did to that young girl at O'Hare was completely wrong. I recorded the whole thing and the world is watching now." Patricia's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "I don't know what you're talking about. I was just doing my job, maintaining security and standards for our passengers." Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her the video, which now had over 1 million views. "This is what I'm talking about. You destroyed that girl's legitimate ticket without even checking if it was real. You humiliated a child based on nothing but your own prejudices." For the first time, Patricia felt a flutter of concern in her stomach as she watched the video of herself tearing up Maya's boarding pass. The comments were harsh and unforgiving. People were calling for her to be fired, sharing the video with news outlets, and demanding answers from Sci-Fi Airlines. That ticket was suspicious, Patricia insisted, but her voice lacked the confidence it had earlier. "I have the right to deny boarding to anyone I suspect of fraud." Marcus shook his head. "You didn't suspect fraud. You saw a black teenager and assumed she didn't belong in first class. That's not security, that's discrimination, and now everyone can see it." After Marcus left, Patricia hurried to the crew lounge and pulled out her phone. Her heart sank as she saw that the video was everywhere. Her Facebook was flooded with friend requests and angry messages. Twitter was buzzing with her name, and not in a good way. The hashtag Justice for Maya was trending, and people were calling for boycotts of Sci-Fi Airlines until she was fired. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, Victoria Johnson's private jet was preparing for takeoff. She had spent the past hour on the phone with her executive team, getting updates on the situation and preparing for damage control. But this wasn't just about business anymore. It was about her daughter's dignity and her own principles as a leader. Victoria's head of human resources, David Martinez, called her with an update. "Mrs. Johnson, I've pulled Patricia Williams' complete file. She's had 7 formal complaints in the past 3 years, all involving treatment of minority passengers. Each time, her supervisors classified them as misunderstandings and gave her additional training, but the pattern is clear." Victoria felt her anger rising. 7 complaints? And she was still allowed to interact with passengers. Who was her direct supervisor? Regional Manager Tom Harrison. He's been with the company for 8 years, and he consistently downplayed the complaints, saying Patricia was just being thorough about security procedures. Victoria made a mental note. Tom Harrison would also be held accountable for his failure to address this pattern of behavior. As the CEO, she took full responsibility for creating a culture where such discrimination could flourish unchecked. Her jet took off from Chicago as the sun was setting, and Victoria used the flight time to watch the video of her daughter's humiliation over and over again. Each viewing made her more determined to ensure that this would be the last time any Sci-Fi Airlines employee would treat a passenger with such disrespect. Victoria also used the flight time to review the company's policies and procedures. She realized that while the airline had written policies against discrimination, there hadn't been enough training or enforcement to make those policies meaningful. This incident was going to be the catalyst for major changes throughout the entire organization. When Victoria's jet landed in New York, she was met by her head of security and her personal assistant. They drove directly to JFK Airport, where Victoria had arranged to meet with the airport manager and security officials who had been involved in Maya's case. Officer Rodriguez was waiting for them, and he immediately stood when Victoria walked into the security office where Maya was still waiting. Maya looked up with surprise when she saw her mother, not recognizing the determined, businesslike woman who had replaced her usual warm, nurturing mom. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry this happened to you," Victoria said, pulling Maya into a tight hug. "But I promise you this is going to be made right." Officer Rodriguez cleared his throat respectfully. "Ma'am, I have to say, your daughter handled this situation with remarkable grace and dignity. She never raised her voice or became disrespectful, even when she was being treated so poorly." Victoria looked at her daughter with pride, even as her heart broke for what Maya had endured. That's because she was raised to treat others with respect, which makes it even more inexcusable that she wasn't shown the same courtesy by our employee. "Our employee?" Officer Rodriguez looked confused. Victoria took a deep breath. It was time to reveal her identity. "Officer Rodriguez, I should introduce myself properly. I'm Victoria Johnson, and I'm the CEO and owner of Sci-Fi Airlines." The room fell silent. Maya's eyes widened in shock. She had always known her mother was successful in business, but she had never imagined that her mother owned the entire airline. "Mom," Maya whispered, "you own Sci-Fi Airlines?" Victoria nodded, her eyes never leaving her daughter's face. "I built this company from nothing over the past 15 years, sweetheart." Every decision, Every policy, every hire was supposed to reflect our values of treating every passenger with dignity and respect. What happened to you today was a complete failure of those values, and it's my responsibility to fix it. Officer Rodriguez was still processing this information. So when Patricia Williams destroyed your daughter's ticket, she was discriminating against the daughter of her ultimate boss. But more importantly, she was discriminating against a child who deserved better. Victoria finished. The fact that I own the airline doesn't make what happened to Maya more wrong than if it had happened to any other passenger. But it does mean that I have the power to ensure this never happens again. Victoria turned to her assistant. I want Patricia Williams suspended immediately, pending a full investigation. I want her supervisor, Tom Harrison, in my office first thing tomorrow morning. And I want a complete review of our hiring practices, training procedures, and complaint handling processes. Maya was still staring at her mother in amazement. Mom, why didn't you ever tell me you owned an airline? Victoria sat down beside her daughter and took her hands. Because I wanted you to have a normal childhood, baby girl. I wanted you to be judged for who you are, not for what your mother owns. I never wanted the money or the business to define our relationship. But if people knew who I was, maybe they wouldn't treat me like that flight attendant did, Maya said quietly. Victoria shook her head firmly. No, sweetheart. People should treat you with respect because you're a human being who deserves dignity. Not because your mother is wealthy or powerful. What happened today was wrong no matter who you are, and it's my job to make sure it doesn't happen to any other child, regardless of their background. As they prepared to leave the security office, Victoria's phone buzzed with updates from her public relations team. The story was now being covered by major news networks, and Sci-Fi Airline stock was beginning to drop in after hours trading. The company was facing a public relations crisis of unprecedented proportions. But Victoria wasn't thinking about stock prices or media coverage. She was thinking about the 7 other passengers who had filed complaints about Patricia Williams, and how many others might have suffered similar treatment but never reported it. She was thinking about the culture she had allowed to develop in her company, and the changes that needed to be made immediately. Most of all, she was thinking about her daughter, who had been forced to grow up a little bit today, learning harsh lessons about prejudice and injustice in the most personal way possible. Tomorrow, Victoria would begin the process of rebuilding Sci-Fi Airlines into the company it was always supposed to be. But tonight, she just wanted to hold her daughter and make sure she knew how much she was loved. 3 days after the viral incident, Victoria Johnson stood at the podium in Sci-Fi Airlines' main conference room, facing a room filled with reporters, cameras, and flashing lights. This was her first public appearance as the CEO of the airline, and she had chosen to reveal her identity under the most challenging circumstances possible. The news conference had been called to address the discrimination incident and announce the changes Victoria was implementing throughout the company. Major news networks were broadcasting live, and the story had become a national conversation about racism in the airline industry. Good morning, Victoria began, her voice strong and clear despite the gravity of the situation. I am Victoria Johnson, CEO and founder of Sci-Fi Airlines. I am here today to address the unacceptable treatment my daughter Maya received from one of our employees, and to announce the comprehensive changes we are implementing to ensure this never happens again. The room erupted with questions from reporters who had been trying to get the company's response for days. Victoria held up her hand for silence and continued. 3 days ago, my 15-year-old daughter was flying alone for the first time, excited about visiting her grandmother in New York. Instead of the positive travel experience every Sci-Fi Airlines passenger deserves, she was humiliated, discriminated against, and had her legitimate ticket destroyed by a flight attendant who made assumptions based on the color of her skin. Victoria paused, her composure never wavering despite the emotional weight of her words. As Maya's mother, I am heartbroken that she had to experience such cruelty. As the CEO of Sci-Fi Airlines, I am outraged that our company's values were so thoroughly betrayed by our own employee. A reporter from CNN raised her hand. Mrs. Johnson, can you tell us about the employee who was involved in this incident? Patricia Williams, a 12-year flight attendant, has been terminated. Her immediate supervisor, Tom Harrison, who failed to properly address multiple previous discrimination complaints against Ms. Williams, has also been terminated. We discovered that Ms. Williams had a pattern of discriminatory behavior that was inadequately addressed by management. Another reporter called out, "Mrs. Johnson, why haven't you been the public face of the airline before now?" Victoria had prepared for this question. "I built Sci-Fi Airlines from the ground up over 15 years, starting as a baggage handler and working my way through every department. I've always preferred to work behind the scenes, focusing on building the company rather than personal publicity. I also wanted to protect my daughter's privacy and give her as normal a childhood as possible. But now your daughter's experience has forced you into the spotlight," another reporter observed. The next morning, Patricia Williams woke up to find her phone buzzing with notifications. The video of her destroying Maya's ticket had exploded overnight, reaching over 10 million views across all social media platforms. News outlets from CNN to local stations were running the story, and her name was trending worldwide alongside hashtags demanding justice. Patricia's stomach dropped as she read message after message calling her racist, demanding her termination, and threatening to boycott Sci-Fi Airlines. Her own family members were texting her, asking if the woman in the viral video was really her. She had never experienced anything like this level of public scrutiny and anger. Her phone rang, and she saw it was her supervisor, Tom Harrison. With trembling hands, she answered the call. "Patricia, I'm sure you're aware of the situation by now." Tom's voice was tense and worried. "Corporate called me at 5 this morning. You're being suspended immediately, pending a full investigation. You need to report to headquarters today at 10 o'clock. "Tom, you know I was just doing my job," Patricia said desperately. "That ticket looked suspicious and I followed protocol." "Patricia, I've seen the video. You destroyed a legitimate ticket without checking the system. The passenger's reservation was valid, and now the company is facing a massive public relations nightmare. The stock has dropped 15% since trading opened this morning." Patricia felt the weight of the situation crashing down on her. "I never meant for this to happen. I thought I was protecting the airline." "Well, you better have a good explanation ready for the executives because they're not happy." "And Patricia?" Tom's voice got quieter. "I've been reviewing your file this morning. There have been a lot of complaints about your treatment of minority passengers over the years. I tried to protect you before, but I can't help you this time." Meanwhile, at Sci-Fi Airlines headquarters, Victoria Johnson was preparing for the most difficult day of her career as CEO. She had arrived at the office at 6 in the morning and had been in constant meetings with her executive team, legal department, and public relations staff. The waiting room outside Victoria's office was buzzing with nervous energy. Tom Harrison sat fidgeting with his tie, knowing that his job was on the line. Several other executives who had failed to address the pattern of discrimination complaints were also waiting to meet with the CEO they had never actually seen in person. Maya had spent the night at her grandmother's house in Queens, finally getting the visit she had originally planned. But even surrounded by her grandmother's love and cooking, she couldn't shake the humiliation she had felt at the airport. She kept checking her phone, watching as the video of her mistreatment spread across the internet. "Baby girl, your mama is going to make this right," her grandmother, Dorothy Johnson, said as she served Maya breakfast. "I raised that woman to never let anybody disrespect her family, and she's built that airline from nothing. Trust me, there's going to be some changes made." Maya looked up at her grandmother in surprise. "Grandma, you knew Mom owned Sci-Fi Airlines?" Dorothy chuckled. "Child, where do you think you got that first-class ticket? Your mama has been keeping this secret for years, trying to give you a normal childhood. But sometimes the world forces you to step into the light, whether you're ready or not." Back at headquarters, Victoria called Tom Harrison into her office first. Tom had been with the company for 8 years and thought he knew the CEO from their email exchanges and conference calls, but he had never met her face to face. When Tom walked into the spacious corner office, he expected to see the middle-aged white man he had always pictured in his mind. Instead, he found himself face to face with a poised, elegant black woman in her early 40s, wearing a perfectly tailored business suit and an expression that could freeze fire. "Mr. Harrison," Victoria said without getting up from her desk. "Please have a seat." Tom's mind was racing as he tried to process what he was seeing. This was the CEO he had been reporting to for years? This was Victoria Johnson? "I've been reviewing your management of Patricia Williams's employment record," Victoria continued, her voice calm but deadly serious. "Over the past 3 years, there have been 7 formal complaints filed against Ms. Williams regarding her treatment of minority passengers. In each case, you dismissed these complaints as misunderstandings and recommended additional training instead of disciplinary action. Tom shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Mrs. Johnson, Patricia has always been a dedicated employee. I felt that additional training was more appropriate than punishment for what seemed like policy confusion. Victoria slid a folder across the desk to Tom. Policy confusion? Mr. Harrison, these complaints describe a clear pattern of discriminatory behavior. Ms. Williams regularly questioned the legitimacy of tickets held by Black and Latino passengers, often requiring additional verification that she didn't demand from white passengers. Tom opened the folder and saw copies of all the complaints he had dismissed over the years. Reading them together like this, the pattern was undeniable, and he realized how badly he had failed as a manager. Furthermore, Victoria continued, yesterday's incident involved my 15-year-old daughter. Ms. Williams destroyed a legitimate first-class ticket and publicly humiliated a child based solely on racial assumptions. This happened because you failed to properly address her previous misconduct. The blood drained from Tom's face as he realized the full scope of the situation. Your daughter? Mrs. Johnson, I had no idea. The fact that Maya is my daughter is irrelevant to the wrongness of Ms. Williams' actions, Victoria interrupted. But it does mean that I have a very personal understanding of how her discrimination affects real people. You're terminated, effective immediately. Tom's mouth fell open. Mrs. Johnson, please, I've been with this company for 8 years. I have a family, a mortgage. And Patricia Williams has been with the company for 12 years, but that doesn't excuse discrimination, Victoria replied firmly. Your failure to properly manage these complaints has cost this company millions in lost stock value and immeasurable damage to our reputation. More importantly, it allowed a culture of discrimination to flourish under your watch. As security escorted Tom from the building, Victoria prepared for her next meeting with Patricia Williams. She had watched the viral video dozens of times, studying Patricia's body language and the casual cruelty with which she had dismissed Maya's protests. When Patricia entered Victoria's office, she had the same shocked reaction as Tom. This wasn't what she had expected the CEO to look like, and the realization that she had discriminated against the boss's daughter made her feel sick to her stomach. Ms. Williams, Victoria said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. I'm sure you're aware of why you're here. Patricia sat down nervously, her hands shaking. Mrs. Johnson, I want to apologize for what happened yesterday. I thought I was following proper security procedures. Victoria leaned back in her chair and studied Patricia carefully. Security procedures? Ms. Williams, you destroyed a legitimate boarding pass without checking our reservation system. You publicly humiliated a minor passenger based on nothing more than your assumption that she didn't belong in first class. Tell me what exactly made that ticket look suspicious to you? Patricia struggled to find an answer that wouldn't sound racist. Well, she was young and her clothes were casual, and it just seemed unlikely that a Black teenager would have a first-class ticket. Victoria finished. I never said anything about race, Patricia protested weakly. Victoria pulled out her tablet and played the video of the incident. Ms. Williams, I want you to watch this and tell me if you see a security threat, or if you see a scared teenage girl trying to board a plane with a legitimate ticket. As Patricia watched herself destroying Maya's boarding pass, she finally saw the incident from an outside perspective. She saw Maya's confusion and fear. She saw the other passengers' shocked reactions, and she saw her own smugness as she tore up the ticket. Ms. Williams, you've been with Sci-Fi Airlines for 12 years, but you've also had 7 formal complaints filed against you for discriminatory behavior toward minority passengers. This is not an isolated incident, it's a pattern that should have been addressed years ago. Patricia realized that her career was over. Mrs. Johnson, please, I need this job. I'll take sensitivity training, I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Victoria shook her head. Ms. Williams, you're terminated immediately. Your actions yesterday violated our company policies, damaged our reputation, and caused emotional harm to a child. There is no training that can fix the fundamental lack of respect and empathy you demonstrated. As Patricia left the office in tears, Victoria sat alone for a moment, processing the weight of the decisions she had made. She had just fired 2 long-term employees, but she knew it was necessary to send a clear message that discrimination would not be tolerated at Sci-Fi Airlines. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Mom, I saw on the news that you fired the flight attendant. Thank you for believing me and standing up for what's right." Victoria smiled for the first time all day. The hardest part of this crisis was over, but the real work of rebuilding the company's culture was just beginning.